Faucha, hello and welcome back to Keith's Whisky Vlog. My name is Keith, and as well as here on YouTube, obviously you can follow me on Instagram at Whisky Tour Guide Keith. So if you like this video, give me a follow, like and subscribe, leave some comments, let me know what you think. Today we are doing a little whisky tasting for you, as you might be able to tell, because I've got a little bottle sitting next to me on the desk. Now, the whisky that we're tasting for you today is from the Glen Keith distillery, which is on Speyside. And although I'm not really, Speyside is not my favourite whisky region, Glen Keith is probably my favouritely named whisky distillery, because it's called Glen Keith, obviously. Now, Keith is the name of a town up on Speyside, and it's got one or two other distilleries around about. Maybe the most well known is the Strathisla distillery. Strathisla, one of the oldest distilleries in Scotland and one of the most picturesque, photogenic distilleries in Scotland. So if you're ever up on Speyside, the town of Keith is well worth a visit. When you drive into Keith, you see the sign there. It says, "Welcome to Keith, the friendly town." So can't really say much fairer than that. So, the Glen Keith distillery, it was first opened quite late really, it was 1958. The resurgence of Scotch whisky after the big downturn earlier in the century, and it then closed down in 1999. So it was mothballed for a few years and then it reopened again in 2013. So it's not even got 50 full years worth of whisky making behind it quite yet, but it's part of the Chivas portfolio, Chivas Regal, Chivas Brothers, sorry. And a lot of the whisky they make in Glen Keith has and still does go into blends, into blended whiskies. So there's not much in the way of single malts. So this is the only Glen Keith single malt. A regular issue. You can get some older, rarer single malts from Glen Keith. You're looking at maybe companies like Douglas Lang who do independent bottlings, but nothing, not like a standard issue release age statement single malt. So the Glen Keith distillery edition is the one that we're doing for you here today. So we'll get it out, we'll do the little traditional read of the bottle for you, and then we'll taste some, tell you what we think. This one's about halfway down. I've been in at this one. I quite like the packaging, nice colours, nice colour of blue there. Not in the box, quite a lot of advertising fluff on the Glen Keith distillery edition. This is quite a budget whisky. I think this one cost me about £20. They usually market it around about £30. So very decent priced, but often on offer, especially in supermarkets, places like that. It's not got an age statement, it's quite young. They reckon it's maybe 3 or 4 years old, as young as that, maybe up to 5 years old. I noticed the one that I've got here, it's got a little date on the back, obviously, when it was bottled, which is the 25th of October 2018. So if it opened in 2013 or started reproducing, then it's definitely no older than 5 years old, the stuff in this bottle. I say that, there is the outside possibility that they have used some older stock just to beef it up a little bit, marry it together, give it a little bit more depth or body. But most likely the vast majority of the stuff in this bottle is no more than maybe 3, 4, maybe certainly 5 years old at the max. So what do they say about themselves? There's some very well written stuff. They're obviously trying to sell it. So this is the Glen Keith Single Malt Scotch Whisky Distillery Edition, no age statement. Matured in traditional oak. That's obviously instead of the sort of the modern newfangled oak, whatever that is. Traditional oak is, well, it's oak, isn't it? It just sounds better, I suppose. Distilled by master craftsmen on the banks of the River Isla. This is a smooth and distinctive single malt with a satisfyingly warm and lingering finish. So the River Isla, nothing to do with the island of Isla. There's at least 2 river islas that I know of on the mainland which are not related to the island, and it is a Speyside. I don't know if you can see the picture on the box here. It's got some snow on the roof of the distillery. I just noticed earlier on, but there you go. Glen Keith is aged in the finest traditional oak casks. I mean, I wonder what happened to the mediocre casks or the rubbish casks. I wonder who makes whiskey in them. But anyway, Glen Keith have the finest traditional oak casks for a distinctive, smooth and easy drinking Speyside single malt with hints of freshly picked orchard fruits and rich toffee notes. The Glen Keith distillery perches on the Linn of Keith, a sparkling free-flowing waterfall on the River Isla. It's an historic spot, once the stronghold of the Ogilvies of Milton, a branch of one of the most prominent ancient clans of Scotland. Today it is one of Speyside's best kept secrets. Now there's no actual visitor centre at Glen Keith. I have been past it, but I've not visited. I've not went in to the distillery. I think you can by arrangement, but I haven't yet. So that's what it says. I don't think it says much more really. It's got the same on the bottle. Yes, matured and traditional oak, 40%, so it's coming in right at the lower end of strength. 70cl bottle. Yeah, so there's nothing extra that I need to tell you about on the bottle. As I say, quite an attractive bottle, nothing too fancy, but for sort of budget price, it's not too badly presented. Now, regular viewers will know me, as well as doing whisky reviews. I'm also a tour guide in Scotland, so I'm all around Scotland at all times. Now, Speyside, presume you can see the map, the northeast corner, this is the River Spey Valley, and this is the Spey area. That's Spey Bay, where the river enters the sea, and Keith, there we go, it is on the map, so it's a little bit to the east, on the eastern edge of the Spey Valley. Now, as I say, I go around Scotland. There's a tour that we do up to Lewis and Harris and the Outer Hebrides, and when you get up there it's very remote, middle of nowhere, and a lot of the sort of traditional way of life still takes precedence. And the best thing you can do when you're on tour is get your tourists, your visitors, your customers, however you want to call them, to get that authentic local experience. Get them off the bus and ideally getting them meeting some locals. Hear the accent, hear some of the stories, get a little bit of the patter. You'll get experiences that you can't, you can't really buy. Now, on the Isle of Lewis, so that's the big island at the top here, quite tied in with whisky making, I suppose, is the peat, the cutting of peat. Now, traditionally, peat was used as a fuel source. So it's basically like wood or like coal. People would use it, they burn it in the winter, or if it was cold. And it's still the farther to the outreaches of Scotland. Today, people still use peat. Everyone's pretty much connected to the national grid, the electricity grid, but a lot of people still use peat. Basically, it's free. It costs you your labour to cut out the ground. So when you're driving across the peat bogs, there's vast peat bogs on Lewis. There's an old guy right in the middle of the peat bogs, middle of nowhere, no amenities around about, a guy called John. I call him Old John. And he goes up in his little van, he's got his dog with him, and he cuts peat in the traditional style. And now, if I ever see him there and I've got a busload of passengers or tourists, I'll stop and we'll get off, and Old John takes us out onto the peat bog and he cuts the peat. Excellent little demonstration, little experience. The passengers, I mean, I've stood there for about 15 minutes before and been absolutely soaked as the rain comes through, and then dried as the wind then comes through, and you get back on the bus none the worse for wear. So wild, remote. So he just does it for fun. I asked him one day, I says, why do you do this? He says, well, I could sit on the couch, watch the telly, or I could be out here in the fresh air. So as good an excuse as you need, I suppose. So just, you wouldn't even notice him if you drove past normally. You've got to know he's there. Great experience, as I say, and an experience that money can't quite buy. Now, the first year that I started doing that with Old John, he could never remember my name when I stopped there. So my last tour of the year, September, October, I can't remember exactly, but I thought I'll get my nice bottle of whisky. A wee thank you, And I thought, what better to get him than a bottle of Glen Keith? In that way, he would remember my name, surely, from then on. So we went out on the moor, we cut them, people took photos, asked them questions, and then just as we were getting back on the bus, I just put a bottle in the carton on the windscreen of his van and just left it there. And I thought, excellent, that nice wee thank you, and as well, he'll remember me as Keith. So, went back the next year, and what does he say? Hello, Glen. What can you do? Try your best. So, I'm now Glen, but there you go. Right, enough of that nonsense. On to the whisky. We'll get some port. Now, decent colour. I'm not sure. I don't think there's any colour added. I don't think they chill filter it, but I can't say that for sure. Smells like whisky. Always a good start, I suppose. Right, so we'll do a little nose, then I'll taste it in the palate for you, and then we'll add a little bit of water, tell you what we think of the Glen Keith Distillery Edition. And it's quite fresh, it's quite clean, it's quite bright, quite fruity, quite sweet on the nose. Get a little bit of sort of pear. There's nothing too full, I wouldn't say, but as I say, quite clean, quite light, not too bad. So that's it on the nose. Yeah, quite typical of a Speyside, I would say. It's a little bit woody, a bit of honey coming through, that sort of sweetness. So you've got the oak, wood, honey sweetness. You almost got a little bit of, you get a bit of that maltiness. It's maybe just to do with the lack of maturity. When you're talking about maltiness, you're talking about sort of oaty biscuits or sort of digestive biscuits, that sort of, you get a little bit of that coming through. Now, although it's quite light, I can feel it a little bit in my throat. It's a bit sharp, a little bit of heat, and there is a little bit of heat on the tongue as well, so maybe not spicy, but certainly a bit hot. Yeah, maybe a bit more sort of chilly heat as opposed to spicy heat. Nice though. Yeah, certainly lighter on the nose, a little bit heavier in the mouth. I'd say it smells a little bit better than it tastes. So we'll add a little bit of water. I'm going to chuck in 3 drops of water. I could swirl. Again, quite mellow in the nose. Got that lemony, citrusy sweetness. I'd say the pear that I was talking about, that's gone. It's still quite light. It's okay. Still that lemon, that honey, but again quite light. Nothing too. There's nothing to worry you here. Nothing offensive, but at the same time, nothing to really make you fall in love with it either. It's a perfectly decent dram. Pre-dinner drinks, something like that. Get the evening started. So, not the greatest whisky in the world, certainly not the worst whisky in the world. Quite a young whisky, but coming in at £20, an absolute bargain really. You're not going to get single malts much cheaper than that. £30, the RRP, the retail price, I would say is as much as you're going to pay for it, but if you can get it for any less than that, it's not a bad whisky to have lying around. And as I say, great name, so Glen Keith. Right, if you like this, what else might you like? Let me think. So, well, I mentioned the Strathisla distillery. So the Strathisla 12-year-old. Both distilleries are, they're not quite the same site, but they are within a stone's throw of each other. And the Strathisla 12 certainly nicer dram, but same stable if you like, same area, same ballpark. What else? Just not too far along to the east of the town of Keith is the Inchgour distillery. There's an Inchgour 14-year-old, and it's part of the Flora and Fauna range, if you're familiar with that. So maybe the Inchgour 14, the Strathisla 12, and I think just with the honey, possibly it quite reminds me of, I think, yep, on the shelf here is the Highland Park 12, quite a sweet honey dram as well. And that's, for a 12-year-old, for an age statement, that's relatively decent price as well, the Highland Park 12. So Highland Park 12, Inchgour 14-year-old, Strathisla 12-year-old. 3 drams. If you can't get this, or if you like this and you want to try something similar, look out for them. Now, that's me at the end of my little tasting of the Glen Keith. Look out for more. I assume as the distillery matures, then they'll have older whisky to sell. You might see a 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old in the next few years, and they will be worth checking out. So that's me for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully we'll see you again. Check out my other videos, and all that leaves me to say is cheers. Slán Java.